Greetings, YouTube. Today we are down in the vacuum room and we have a working water lift gauge, and we are going to measure from the unit and the farthest outlet and a couple outlets in my house, and we're going to see what the difference is. I've got a fairly new bag now in it since the last time it was measured, and we just kind of want to see what is the difference between the endo hose just through the pipe directly with the machine. Kind of what the loss is. There's really not a huge loss, but I think it might be a good idea just to document fully what this involves. So, without further ado, we're going to stick this in, and we're going to get to testing. Why is that button in such a shitty place? So, where it was reading on the gauge, get this in focus, was about 79, and that was just directly at the unit through what's supposed to be the garage port with a fairly new bag. So now we're going to test it throughout the house. We're going to test it at the closest inlet through the pipe, and then we're going to test it through the rest of the system. Alright, we're in my garage, and I just wanted to explain on camera that I do have some pipe that's just not glued up. In fact, this whole section here, I've got about 10 feet of pipe that's not glued up. So, during these tests, I believe that that probably had some sort of effect on loss of suction, and I'm just not sure where I'm going to put this extra outlet in my garage, so I'm not going to fuck with that right now. But I just wanted to disclose, for the test reason, that we were probably bleeding a little suction out of this facility here in my garage right now. So this is the outlet I first tested with the working water lift gauge. So we're going to test it now. Again, now we have a bag that's almost empty. So we're going to test it. So we got about 76 through the pipe right there. Now these tests are going to be a little off because I do have some pipe that's not glued in the garage currently because I'm trying to decide where I'm going to put it, one last outlet. So that is something to keep in mind. It might not look it, but this is one of the furthest outlets from the system, so we're going to test it. Excuse the lighting. So, I don't know how much of that was actually in frame, but the test with the working water lift was 75. So we've lost 5 inches of working water lift through the pipe. That is not really a significant difference, but that's something to keep in mind. So this outlet's in the middle of the system, so we're going to test it and see what the working water lift is. So that was right about hovering right about 75, 76 inches of water. Now the part of the system I think would lose the most airflow and water lift would be a hydro hose, because it goes through the most amount of track. There's actually a 65 feet plus a 5-foot buffer plus another 10 feet of pipe that has to go through before it gets to the end of this. So let's test that and see where that is. Switch it on. And I was correct. The hydro hose lost the most amount of suction and airflow, and that wasn't 5. That was hovering. That was almost half our power that it lost. So that was a significant difference between the hydro hose. Now I don't have the hydro hose all the way out, so I'm not going to pull the hydro hose all the way out, and we're going to see how that is. I didn't think about that. So now, hydro hose is all the way out. We're going to test the working water lift again and see what the difference is. Now, where it locks up right here is actually where I think it loses the most, because there's a rubber gasket that cinches on here and does that essentially. And as you can see, the hose is not exactly an even surface. So let's see what the working water lift is now. So there was about 5 to 10 inches of working water lift difference with the hose out. It's actually better with the hose out, so that's something to keep in mind when we're measuring working water lift in a Central Vac with a hydro hose. Alright, so the question is, what is going to be the working water lift at the end of this hose, which the hose is actually where we're going to lose the most amount of suction through. Not only a hydro hose, but this, you have this thing that bleeds suction that could impair. So we're going to test it and see. As usual, you lose the most amount of power through a hose. And you can see that I did have the suction bleeder shut. So I had this up over the button lock trying to get the best seal. So that kind of shows you what you lose just through the hose. And why I say the less than 5 inches of water that you lose around the house through the pipe is absolutely worth the convenience of having the pipe in the wall. That's the point of the Central Vac, is convenience, convenience, and convenience. So we're going to test the hose directly on the unit, and you're not going to like the results because they're not going to really be any different. Alright, here we are at another outlet that's pretty far away from the unit. We're going to test the working water lift and see how we do. So that looked to be hovering right around 70 to me. Why is that not in focus? So that tells me that my working water lift and what we're losing is actually not a whole lot through the system. So as always, please comment below, follow us on Instagram, give this video a big thumbs up, and hit that subscribe button. Alright, well, we're now going to test it directly at the unit, as close as you can get. And as you can see, it was actually a little less directly at the unit. That's because the seal between this hose and this, why it's good, this style valve isn't as good as the newer electro valves I have. So it actually sits in there all the way, but it just doesn't make as good a seal. And it's also, well, I guess it's in the same part of the canister. So that concludes my video on, well, it doesn't conclude because I'm going to go to the longest valve in my house and test it as well as I will edit in through the magic of editing. But that kind of shows you why, if you test it, and whether you have pipe or not with the Central Vac, it doesn't really matter. You're getting about the same result at the end of the day, especially once you lose all that power through the hose. But you're really not losing any more power through the hose compared to a normal vacuum, which I will now. So I have here a Miele Red Velvet, and we're going to test for, as a control, we're going to show you how much suction you lose through the hose. So first we're going to make sure that's closed. We're going to fit the gauge to the hose, and we're going to test it. So we're going to call that 40 inches of working water left. We are now going to test directly at the canister. So we're going to see how this pans out. Might have to move the camera a little bit. Alright. I'm still out of frame here. Sorry about that, folks. Alright. So now we're going to test it directly at the canister and see what we lose through the hose. So as you saw, we only lost a few inches of water through the hose, but we definitely did. And that is the key factor, is that hoses have swivels on them and multiple gaskets where they have to go into the into the vacuum, and they can lose suction. Now this is a brand new vacuum. Let me show you what a used vacuum loses through the hose. Alright. I have here a vintage, it is now 20 years old, Miele 312 here, and we're going to see what it loses through the hose. And you know, we have all these joints of play and stuff, so we're going to test it. Now the motor is not as strong on this series of Miele. Make sure that's closed, so keep that in mind. We're right about 30. So let's test it up here. And that, my friends, might explain to you where you actually lose suction and airflow through a hose on a vintage machine. Now this machine doesn't have as much power as the Central Vac, and definitely doesn't have as much power as the Red Velvet, but that's just why we have this gauge and why we're able to do these tests to see. So for reference, the Red Velvet was the control. The Central Vac we tested throughout the house with different outlets, and now we've tested a vintage vacuum with a loose hose. So I hope that better gives you an understanding of where vacuums can, over time the tolerances wear in and where suction can be lost. But again, these are not huge numbers on most vacuums. Again, this is a 20-year-old vacuum, so it's perfectly acceptable for its original hose to lose a little bit of vacuum through it. But when we have something that's less than 2 years old like this, you don't expect that, but you kind of do. So that's why, in conclusion, if you hook up your hose directly to your Central Vac versus through the pipes, we're not talking even as much loss as a hose will gain over time. We're talking all those tests, you'll see it's within 5 inches of water and loss. So again, I hope that's clear and that's explained on camera as well as it appears to me. So go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, check out our Instagram, and I want a big thank you to all of our Patreon supporters who have helped make the channel grow and who help fund things like this.